Hi, in this video we'll be looking at how to use search and replace to do bulk editing of data model values. I've created a simple data model and read in a number of tables. Currently I haven't groomed the descriptions or added any joins yet. Let's start off with something simple like changing the descriptions of a column. You can see here I've got a ledger table and it has a column called account code, but currently it's abbreviated. Let's use the search and replace to adjust this abbreviation. If we come into search, type in the find keyword, which is account in this case, and then we have a look at the objects. We can target particular objects in a data model. In this case, we're just targeting the fields and their descriptions. Setting these object types correctly is really important to prevent unintended replacing of values. Let's do a find. If we were to double click the item in the find list, we could jump to that object in the data model. If there was an item that we didn't want to do these replace on, we could delete it from the list by hitting the delete key. I'm coming up to replace with now, then we can come over to replace all, and you can see that there were 30 locations replaced. And if we come back and refresh the list, you can see now the abbreviation's been filled out. This list can be customized. Currently it's showing the code and description, but I'd also like to see the raw SQL name for the column. Come to Tools Options, and you can see we can change the labels for the tables. So I'm just using the lookup to display the code, the description, and the SQL name, and the same for the fields. Now when we refresh the list, you can see we get a more detailed view. Next, I'd like to add a join from this table, which is a ledger transactions table, to a chart of accounts table. You can see the chart of accounts table has a cryptic description. Let's just manually edit this one because there is only one location. And I'm coming back to the ledger and we'll change the description here as well. Then I'll come to the account code, right click and select new join. Now that we've changed that description, we can do a find to find the chart of accounts table, and then we can bind the columns. So it's going to be joining where the account code equals the account code. We've done this join on one location in one table, but there are many tables that contain the column account code. So I'd like to apply this join throughout the whole data model just after the column account code. Right click on the join and select copy. It's important that this be done before opening the search and replace. Come in and now enter the column name, and we'd like to target the fields and the SQL. Press find, and you can see it's found quite a few tables with this column name. Next, come over to special actions, and from the list you can see we have add join to all tables containing the field in this list. Let's select this item. Next we'll have a series of options about how we'd like to apply that join. And here we have applied the join to 27 locations throughout the data model. If I come down and double click on one of the items, you'll find that it's placed the join just after that column. Next we'll look at lookup logic. You can see the chart of accounts account code here. I'd like to define a lookup for the ledger account code that inherits the lookup on the chart of accounts table. So I'm selecting inheritance here. Let's go to the chart of accounts table and inherit the lookup on the account code. In this way we will get a complete list of accounts instead of a select distinct from the ledger for the account code. Now that this lookup has been defined, I'd like to apply this lookup to all the account codes throughout the whole data model. This time, right click on the account code and select copy, then come into the search, and just as we did before, let's look for all the account codes. Come to special actions, and from the list select apply lookup details to all fields in list. And as we did before, we'll jump to one of the fields, and if we have a look at the attributes of the account code, you can see that inherit lookup has been applied. Next, let's have a look at this period column. Currently the period column is set as an integer, but I'd like to turn it into a real period so that we can handle years and calendar months, for example. So I'm coming up to the data type and I'm changing it to be a period. In conjunction with that, I also need to set the length. This particular period has 4 digits for the year and 3 for the period, so altogether it has a length of 7. I'm going to put the period now on the clipboard by selecting copy, and let's come back into the search and replace. Let's look for all columns of the type period, and we'll target fields and SQL. Next, let's come to special actions, and from the list select apply data types to all fields. If I jump to one of the locations and have a look at the period at this stage, you can see that it's come up in red. This is because we've applied the data type, but the length isn't quite right. It needs to be set to 7 or 8, depending on the length of the period. And the data model knows that length 10 is an invalid value. Come back into that search and apply the rest of the details. There's no particular entry for length, so we just need to use SQL details. And you can see now that the error is gone and the length is also set to 7. Next, let's look at how we can bulk hide or delete columns. You can see I have a column here called hold op ID. What I'd like to do is hide this column wherever it appears in the data model. Come into search, enter in the column name and target field SQL again and select find. Now in special actions, you can see we have an option to hide the fields in the list or delete the fields in the list. In this case, I'm going to select hide. And if we refresh the table, you can see now the entry's gone grey to say that the field is now invisible. Next, let's look at how we can apply bulk changes to tables. In this example, I would like to create an initialize event on all the tables throughout the data model. So in here, I'll have an event called initialize table, and in there, for example, I'll add custom columns to the tables if they're present. I'm coming into processes and I'm going to create a new process, and this is called table initialize, for example. And inside that event, I'll have some logic that will add the custom fields to the table. Let's come back to the table now and bind the event. Now we have the event on one table, we can come up, select table copy. This can be done on the table up here or from the tree. Then come into search, and we want to target tables, so I'm selecting tables, and there's no particular table that we're after, so I'm going to leave the find blank. This way we can list all the tables in the system. Then come to special actions, and from the list you can see that we have a few entries here for tables, and one of them is apply event details to all tables and lists. You could also use this same sort of logic to apply a where clause to every table in the system, for example. And if I jump to the table, you can see that this table also now has the event bound to it. Next, I'd like to discuss the concept of creating common dictionary keys. At this point, all the columns and tables have constants for their description, and they're not using a dictionary. So if I was to change this description here, it would be just for this column in this table, and all the other period columns would maintain the original description. Once we create a dictionary, all these labels are going to be centralized, so if we change the terminology, it'll be changed everywhere where the word period would appear, for example. Before creating a dictionary, I advise that you go through and do search and replace on all the abbreviations and cryptic terms to get them as accurate as possible. To create a dictionary, come up to the dictionary icon, and you can see currently there's nothing in the list. Come over to Special Actions and select Find Constants in Data Model and List. This will identify any constants that haven't been turned into dictionary keys at this stage. You can come back into Special Actions and select Create Keys based on Constant List. You can see here that based on the over 2,000 descriptions, we've reduced the set down to 684, and we can refresh the dictionary list. If I come back in and look at the descriptions on the tables now, You can see that period has an asterisk in front of it. This denotes that the description's coming from the dictionary now. If I have a look at the entries for journal number and journal line, you can see that these still are using abbreviations. Let's do a search and replace now on this term. I'll do a find for journal, targeting the fields and the descriptions. You can see that it hasn't found any descriptions. This is because the descriptions are now held in the dictionary. We could force it to find the descriptions even on the fields by selecting Resolve Dictionary keys. But we won't be able to replace this because the object, the true object, is actually the dictionary, not the fields. For this reason, I'm going to change the search to target the dictionary, and then we can replace it with the full name, which is journal. Now refresh the list and you can see journals now being corrected. Now that we do have a dictionary, it's possible to translate the dictionary into other languages. Before doing the translation, just make sure that any abbreviations and incorrect terms are fixed beforehand. Come back into the dictionary and from Special Action select Supported Languages. I'm going to select Spanish in this case. Now we've selected the language, we can open up a term, for example account balance, and come in here and type in the Spanish translation. Or we can come back into Special Actions. I'm selecting Auto Translate. Select the target language, and if you don't have your own ID, just leave this blank. And you can see that the Auto Translate is kicking in. You'll just need to go through this list later on and confirm that the translations are indeed accurate. When doing bulk editing in a data model, it's possible that you may want to revert the data model back to before the bulk edit was done. For this reason, I suggest that you save the data model before doing bulk editing. And if there is a mistake, you can then restore the data model back to an earlier version. In summary, when doing bulk search and replace, make sure that you target the correct objects so you don't inadvertently change objects that you weren't intending to. Also, when using special actions, make sure that you copy the object before opening the search and replace. This is because the special actions are always applied to the object that was copied before opening the search window.